Lesson for the College Algebra Prep Chapter 6 test review. You want to make sure on these questions that you factor every chance you get things down to their most basic factors so that it's easier for you to see maybe what a greatest common factor is or what your least common denominator is. Looking at number 1, y plus 2, I can't factor out anything. However, on my 2y squared minus 50, I can take a greatest common factor out of 2, and I'm left with y squared minus 25. Now I happen to know that y squared minus 25 is the difference of squares. So I can actually write this as 2 times and then factor that y squared minus 25. That's y plus 5 times y minus 5. So now that I factored that, I'm going to go ahead and cross that other part out. Looking at my denominator, y minus 5 stays the same. 3y plus 6, I can factor out a greatest common factor of 3, and I'm left with y plus 2. So as I rewrite this, I have y plus 2 in my numerator times 2 times y plus 5 times y minus 5. All of that is over my denominator, which is y minus 5 times 3 times y plus 2. Go ahead and cross out what you have in common. So I see that I have a y plus 2 in my numerator and my denominator. I see that I have a y minus 5 in my numerator and my denominator. So I am left with a 2 times y plus 5 in my numerator all over 3. Now you could go ahead and multiply that 2 throughout if you wanted, which would give you 2y plus 10 all over 3. But I recommend for these, you go ahead and keep it in your most basic factors after you've done all the work. For number 2, go ahead and factor this trinomial that's in your first denominator because we need to figure out what those factors are. This comes out to be t plus 4 and t minus 3. Now you'll see that I have a t minus 3 and a t plus 4 for my other denominators. So my common denominator for all 3 fractions, no matter what side of the equation they're on, is t plus 4 and t minus 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply each individual fraction, so every single term on both sides of the equal sign, by our common denominator because we're trying to get rid of the fractions in our denominators. So start by multiplying everything by t plus 4, t minus 3. And I know that's a lot of writing and it looks like a lot of work, but I promise you, writing this out is going to make this make a little more sense when you have to simplify and get down to your basic terms. When I look at my very first fraction, my t plus 5 over the t squared plus t minus 12, I see that I have a t plus 4 here in the numerator in green and a t plus 4 in my denominator. I have a t minus 3 in my numerator in green and a t minus 3 in my denominator. So this first part of my fraction ends up being t plus 5, and that's all I have left. Then I have my plus sign. Now we look at my second fraction. For my second fraction, I see that I have a t minus 3 in green in my numerator and a t minus 3 in my denominator. So I'm left with 1 times t plus 4. Then I look at my equal sign. And on the other side of my equal sign, I see that I have a t plus 4 in my numerator and a t plus 4 in my denominator. I'm left with 3 times t minus 3. Notice I left everything in parentheses. Please do that even if you're left with a 1 times something, just in case that 1 ends up being negative or you have to distribute a negative because of subtraction in the original problem. So from here, I've got t plus 5 plus t plus 4, that's after you distribute that 1, equals 3 times t, so 3t, 3 times negative 3, minus 9. Go ahead and simplify. 2t plus 9 equals 3t minus 9. Subtract 2t and you have 9 equals t minus 9. Add your 9, 18 equals t. So over here, when we solve, t equals 18. Question 3. When you are adding and you have common denominators, you don't have a ton of work that you have to do. For here, if you have common denominators, just go ahead and leave the denominator the same and then add your numerator. Now in this one, when I add my numerator, I can't really simplify that. I can rearrange terms in descending order. So that gives me x squared plus 4x over x plus 3. And then I can factor out a greatest common factor of x in my numerator, and I'm left with x plus 4 all over x plus 3. But that's about as simplified as you can get. So once again, you can have x squared plus 4x over x plus 3, or you can have x times x plus 4 all over x plus 3. The reason you want to factor when you can, like what I did on this one, is because there's always that possibility that you can factor out something like an x or a 2, and then maybe you're able to cancel more factors out between your numerator and denominator. On this next one, factor out anything that you have in common, which I don't on this one, but I do need to get a common denominator. So if I have a minus b in my denominator for the first fraction, my second fraction I can also write as a minus b. I just have to factor out a -1 first. So that leaves me with 4a squared minus, and then we've got -1 times 3a minus 2b squared. And all of that is over the a minus b that we were able to factor. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go ahead and distribute as much as I can. So if I have minus a -1, that ends up being plus. So this becomes 4a squared plus 3a minus 2b squared all over a minus b. And so that's our answer, because you can't factor 4a squared plus 3a minus 2b squared. So that's going to stay the same. Now, once again, if you're wondering how I was able to get that canceled out in the middle, I kind of skipped 2 steps in a way. You would technically have to distribute this -1, but then you would have to take this negative sign here for subtraction, that's also a -1, and distribute that as well. That's no different than saying, hey, I've got a -1 here for subtraction, and I've got a -1 here. These together, -1 times -1 gave us +1, which then if you distribute is how that 3a minus 2b squared stayed the same. So we did have a double negative there. Okay, on the next one. Once again, you want to start by factoring what you can. So you have y squared minus 4y minus 12. That's going to give you y minus 6 and y plus 2. So you're going to notice that on this one I don't have an equal sign, but I do have a plus sign. And my second fraction only has a y plus 2. In order to get a common denominator, you have to multiply by a factor of 1. That way you're technically only changing the way the fraction looks, not the value of it. So I'm going to multiply both my numerator by y minus 6 and my denominator by y minus 6. So I'm left with 3y plus 2 plus 5 times y minus 6 all over my common denominator, which is now y minus 6 times y plus 2. I am adding up here in the numerator. I cannot take out that y minus 6 in the numerator and the denominator. I can't do it. That only works if everything's being multiplied. And here in the numerator, I've got a plus sign. So you have to go ahead and distribute that 5 and simplify. So 3y plus 2 plus 5y minus 30 all over y minus 6 times y plus 2. I'm out of room. I'm going to come back down here. I've got 8y minus, looks like 28 here, all over y minus 6 and y plus 2. Okay, if you're able to factor anything out, do that so we can always check. In the numerator, I could take out a 4, and I'm left with y minus 7, 2y minus 7. And I'm still left with that y minus 6 and y plus 2. But that right there won't simplify. I can't cross anything out. So if you notice on that 8y minus 28 and want to leave it that way, you can. So for number 5, our answer would be 8y minus 28 divided by y minus 6 times y plus 2. Once again, the reason you want to try to go ahead and factor that, like I did with my 4 and getting my 2y minus 7, is because you want to check and see, are there any common factors that you can cancel out once you've combined like terms in the previous step and factored or done whatever you have to there. For the last question on this page, we need to once again make sure we have common denominators. So for this one, I have an x minus 1, and on the one on the right here, I have an x plus 5 and an x minus 1. So I need to turn my first fraction into one that has a denominator of x plus 5 and x minus 1. So once again, just like on number 5, we need to multiply by a factor of 1. I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to multiply it by x plus 5. And I'm going to take my x minus 1 in the denominator and I'm going to multiply that by x plus 5. I know that's starting to look messy. You are left with 2 times x plus 5 minus, because that's subtraction in that problem, your x plus 3, and we put that in parentheses as well. All of that is over the same denominator, which is x plus 5 and x minus 1. Now I need to go ahead and distribute and combine like terms. So I have 2x plus 10 minus x minus 3, because this is a negative 1 that you have to distribute. That's why we put those in parentheses. My denominator I'm going to leave the same. So x plus 5 and x minus 1. Go ahead and combine like terms. So we're left with x plus 7 over x plus 5 times x minus 1. Nothing will cancel out. I can't factor any further. So my final answer is x plus 7 all over x plus 5 times x minus 1. And we're ready for the next page. Number 7, this says find the simplified form for f of x and list all restrictions on the domain. When you list restrictions on the domain, you have to list restrictions from the original equation. It's not after you simplify it, it's before you even begin. So we're going to look at all the factors in my denominator. I've got x plus 3. And I'll set that equal to 0. I've got x minus 1, so I'll set that to 0. And I'm going to check my denominator on the third one. And I think if I factor that, I get x plus 3 and x minus 1. So I've already used both of those, so I don't have to set those equal to 0. When I solve, here, x equals negative 3 and x equals positive 1. So when I list my restrictions, x cannot equal negative 3 or positive 1. And you can list them like that, or you can rewrite the x does not equal for both of them. Okay, so now we have to go ahead and get common denominators. My common denominator for all three terms is x plus 3, x minus 1. So we're going to go in here and we're going to make sure that both of the two beginning fractions have the same denominator. So we multiply this first one. It's got the x plus 3, so we multiply by x minus 1. Since I'm trying to get common denominators, once again, you're multiplying by factors of 1. So x minus 1 over x minus 1. That's going to give us 2 times x minus 1 for that first one. Next, I'm going to multiply my second one by x plus 3 because it already has the x minus 1 part. So we multiply by x plus 3 over x plus 3. That's going to give me a minus x times x plus 3 because we have that subtraction sign in front of that fraction. And then for my last one, that fraction already has both factors in the denominator. So we don't have to change anything. We just put plus x squared plus 2. All of this is over the common denominator, x plus 3 times x minus 1. Now what we do is we go through, we distribute, we clean it up, whatever we need to do from there. So I'm going to shrink this a little bit and move it out of the way. Okay, so now to go ahead and carry on with what we were doing. 2 times your x minus 1 we're going to distribute is 2x minus 2. Then I have a negative 1x times x and times that 3. So that's a minus x squared minus 3x. Then I leave my purple x squared and plus 2 alone because I didn't have to do anything to those. Okay, let's go ahead and combine like terms up in the numerator. So it looks like my x squareds cancel out because negative x squared plus x squared is 0x squared. Next, I've got a 2x minus 3x. That gives us a negative x. And then I have a negative 2 plus 2, which is going to give us 0 again. So we've got negative x. And then our denominator, x plus 3 and x minus 1. I can't simplify that, so that's my final answer. You could write this as negative 1 times x, or even put the negative out front of the whole fraction, but I'm going to leave mine in the numerator for now. Okay, the next question. This one, you're also asked to list your restrictions. So let's go ahead and factor it. You've got your x plus 2. Down here, you've got your x squared minus x minus 6. But notice that this is division. So your actual problem is going to be x squared minus 9 over x plus 2 times, and then x squared minus x minus 6 all over x squared minus 2x. So that's what that turns into. So once you get that rewritten so that you're multiplying, now go ahead and look at what your denominators are. You have x plus 2 equals 0. Then you can factor out this part. You can take an x out, and then you have x minus 2. So that's going to be x equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. So when you solve those, you get x equals negative 2, x equals 0, and x equals positive 2. So your restrictions, x cannot equal negative 2, 0, or positive 2. Okay, so now go ahead and factor everything you can. Numerator, because the denominator is done. So the numerator, when we go to factor, x squared minus 9 is the difference of squares. X plus 3, x minus 3. Over in the other numerator, you're looking at x squared minus x minus 6. So we need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 6. So they have opposite signs, but they add to give us negative 1. So you've got x minus 3, x plus 2. Okay, so now that we've got this done, and I'm going to rewrite it because I've got space. I've got x plus 3, x minus 3. I've got another x minus 3, and I've got an x plus 2. In my denominator, I've got an x plus 2, I've got an x, and then I've got an x minus 2. Now that you've multiplied everything, cross out what you have in common. The only thing I see in common is x plus 2 and x plus 2. So your final answer is going to be x plus 3 times x minus 3 times x minus 3 all over x times x minus 2. Now we had one similar to this on one of our homework assignments. If you wanted to write that x minus 3 and x minus 3 as x minus 3 quantities squared, like I just did in red, you can do that. Now, I'm not going to leave that because it's confusing, but you could write that instead of your two x minus 3s that I have in green. And we are ready for the next problem. On number 9, you're simplifying. So before we do, this is a fraction or a set of fractions divided by another pair of fractions. Before we try to do keep, change, flip, I need to get those into one fraction over one fraction. So I need to get common denominators for my two fractions in the numerator and for my two fractions in the denominator. In the numerator, I see that I have 3 over a plus 4 over b. So they don't have anything in common in the denominators. So I'm going to make my fraction have a denominator of ab. In order to do that, I need to multiply my 3 over a times a b over b. That's going to give me 3b plus. And then I need to multiply my 4 over b times a over a. That's going to give me 4a over ab. In the denominator, I'm going to do something very, very similar. So on this one, I'm going to multiply my first fraction by b over b. That gives me 4b over ab. Then I have my minus sign, and then I've got to multiply my 3 over b times a over a. So 3a over ab. Now that I've got a fraction over a fraction, we're going to turn this into keep, change, flip. So to divide these two fractions, we got 3b plus 4a all over ab. And then we're going to multiply by the flipped version of that green fraction. So ab over 4b minus 3a. I cannot cross out my 3b plus 4a or my 4b minus 3a. That cannot be simplified like that. But what I can do, because I'm multiplying, is I can cross out my ab and ab. So I can cross out this term and this term, but these others are essentially in parentheses. You just don't see them. You can't cross anything out. So we're left with 3b plus 4a all over 4b minus 3a. And you could totally rearrange those terms if you wanted and have, 4a plus 3b, or have a negative 3a plus 4b if you wanted. But I'm going to leave them like that. On number 10, we're going to do keep, change, flip on this one as well. These are already written as two fractions, like two whole fractions. So I'm going to write this as x squared minus 3x. So we have x squared minus 4x plus 4. So my x squared minus 3x minus 4 times x minus 4. The next one, I can factor this by doing x minus 2 quantity squared, so x minus 2 times x minus 2. And my denominator here, I can factor, and we're going to make that x plus 3 and x minus 3. Now that I've got all my factors, we can cross out what they have in common because this is multiplication. So I've got my 4 green factors in the numerator, 4 green factors in the denominator. Now I see a plus 3, one of them in the numerator, and I see one in the denominator. And that's about it. You can't cross anything else out. So this is going to end up being x minus 6 times x minus 2 times x minus 2. Once again, you could write that as x minus 2 quantity squared all over x plus 4 times x minus 4 times x minus 3. Okay, let's look at our next one. Oh, that's why that looks like that. Hold on. Okay, on this one, I apologize. X plus 3, this is an x minus 2. So you are able to cross out an x minus 2 here and here. So let's clean this up a little bit. There we go. I said it one way but did not write it that way. So this x squared plus x minus 6 is x plus 3, x minus 2. And so therefore you do have an x minus 2 in both the numerator and the denominator. Okay, next one. When you get to one like number 11, feel free to cross multiply. That's not how we originally taught it with the book, but then when we got to section 6.5, that's how we did it when we had proportions. That's what you're used to from Algebra 1 and from geometry. So please do what you're used to if it still works. In this case, it does. So we are going to cross multiply, and we're going to do 3 times 3x plus 2 equals, and then we do 2x minus 1 times 5. So 2x minus 1 times 5. Now from here, we're going to distribute and multiply. So we've got 9x plus 6 equals 10x minus 5. Subtract your 9x. 6 equals x minus 5. Add your 5. 11 equals x. So in this one, x equals 11. And we're ready for the next page. Okay, on the next one, this one, you cannot cross multiply yet. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and factor your denominators, get everything down to their lowest terms. So we've got t plus 10, t minus 1, and then I've got that on the rest of them. So I need to turn all of these into that t plus 10, t minus 1. We're gonna do what we did on the very first problem, or problem number 2, I should say. And we're going to multiply, and we're going to multiply everything by that denominator. So multiply your first term times t plus 10, t minus 1. So just like we did on question 2. Multiply your second term by your t plus 10 and t minus 1, because that's our common denominator. Multiply your last fraction by t plus 10 times t minus 1. Now go through, cross out what you have in common. So in our first one, the green and purple one, I have a t plus 10 and a t minus 1. I am left with t minus 4. Next, I'm going to cross out my t plus 10 and t plus 10 in blue, and I'm left with 1 times t minus 1. After the equal sign, I'm going to cross out my t minus 1s, and I'm left with 3 times t plus 10. And you start solving. Now this positive 1 here in the middle, if you distribute that, nothing changes. So you've got t plus t is 2t. Negative 4 and negative 1 is going to give you negative 5. And then 3t plus 30. Subtract your 2t, negative 5 equals t plus 30. And then go ahead and subtract your 30. Negative 35 equals t. So over here, number 12, t equals negative 35. For number 13. Number 13, when you're looking for f of negative 2 and f of 3, you're just plugging in and evaluating. So f of negative 2 means I've got negative 2 plus 3 over negative 2 minus 2. That's going to give me 1 over negative 4. which is the same thing as negative 1/4 if you want to put the negative out front. For the other one, f of 3 means I'm going to do 3 plus 3 over 3 minus 2. That's going to give me 6 over 1, which is just 6. So f of 3 is 6. And you can do all of that on your calculator, so you don't technically have to show work. When you are dividing, we just did this recently, when you are dividing and you're dividing by a monomial, like we are here on 14, you just divide every single term by that monomial. So you take this 9a cubed b and divide everything by that. So since I'm writing them underneath, I'm going to cross it out over here on the right. So let's see what these terms turn into. This guy, 18 divided by 9 is 2. If I take out my a's, I take out 2 in the numerator, I'm left with 1 down in the denominator. Take out my b in the denominator, and I'm left with 1 in the numerator. So I've got 2bc squared all over a for that first term. For the next one, I'm going to keep the minus sign. 6 over 9 becomes 2/3. I can cross out my a, and I'm left with 2 in the denominator, and then I can cross out both b's. So that's 2 over 3a squared. Then I've got 45 divided by 9. That's going to leave me with 5 over 1. So that's a 5. A cubed divided by a cubed, my a's are gone. B cubed divided by b, I'm left with 2 b's in the numerator, and then of course c there with a 1. So that's going to be 5b squared c. So your final answer for 14 is 2bc squared all over a minus 2 all over 3a squared plus 5b squared c. On number 15, it does not say whether you have to use long division or synthetic. So if you prefer synthetic, feel free to use it. That's what I'm going to use. If you want to see the long division, come talk to me tomorrow morning before school or before your test. Check out your notes that are posted online, as well as the ones you should have copies of, or find a YouTube video. On this one, when you do synthetic division, you write down the coefficients in your terms here. So y squared, that's a 1, negative 3y is negative 3, negative 25, of course, is negative 25. And then you've got y minus 2. So this has to be in the form y minus something or x minus something. So we write this 2 here. You bring down your first term, which is a 1, multiply it. 1 times 2 is 2. Add negative 1. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. Add negative 27. Now remember, this last term is your remainder. So here on 15, you've got y minus 1, because that's a 1y minus 1. And then you've got minus 27 over y minus 2. And that's because your remainder was negative 27. Now you could technically write this, we did this on the homework, as y minus 1 plus, and then put your negative up with your 27. It's whatever makes the most sense to you. For number 16, you have to use long division. So I'm going to do that one out here to the side. You have to use long division because that is not x minus 2, that is x squared minus 2. So for long division on one like this, make sure your terms are written in descending order. You've got 3x to the 4th plus 2x squared plus 4x minus 5. And we're doing x squared minus 2. You look for what do you have to multiply the very first term by to turn it into that 3x to the 4th. So we're going to take x squared, and I have to multiply that by a 3x squared. That gives me 3x to the 4th. And then 3x squared times negative 2 is a negative 6x squared. And you'll notice I didn't leave space for my x cubed. You do need to make sure that you do that though. But on here, thankfully, didn't make a difference. Now you are subtracting these. So it might help you to say it out loud. 3x to the 4th minus 3x to the 4th is 0x to the fourth. 2x squared minus a negative 6x squared gives you a positive 8x squared. Now you have to multiply that x squared. We're going to bring down the rest of this real quick. So 4x. And I'm going to go ahead and bring down that negative 5. You've got to multiply your x squared out here on the left, your divisor, by 4. Whoops. Let's try that again. So go ahead and multiply by 4. That's going to give you 8x squared, and that's going to give you minus 8. Once again, read it out loud. 8x squared minus 8x squared is gone. Bring down your 4x. Negative 5 minus negative 8 is the same thing as negative 5 plus 8, which is going to give you positive 3. That's your remainder because it has a degree of 1, and you're dividing by something with a degree of 2. You stop when your answer, or your what's left, is a degree smaller than what you're dividing by. So next, here on number 16, we've got 3x squared plus 4, and then we're going to do plus 4x plus 3 all over x squared minus 2. That's how you write your answer for that one. Wait a minute. Oh. Let's double check our multiplication here. I apologize. Okay, I did say we were going to multiply by 8, and then I did not write 8. So that's going to change what our remainder is. So let's bring this down again. I apologize for that. Okay, so let's try this again. Your 2x squared minus negative 6x squared is going to give you 8x squared. Bring down your 4x. Bring down your minus 5. From here, we are going to multiply, like I said, by 8. 8 times x squared gives us that 8x squared we're looking for, but then it gives us a negative 16 over here underneath our negative 5. Now let's go ahead and subtract. You're going to have 0 for this first term. Bring down your 4x. Negative 5 minus negative 16 is going to be negative 5 plus 16. That's a positive 11. So we have 3x squared plus 8 plus, and then 4x plus 11 all over x squared minus 2. Number 17 is one that's written in the form very similar to number 15, so you can use synthetic division for that one. Remember that it has to be in the form of your variable minus your number that we're using for synthetic division. So where this is a plus, that's the same as x minus negative 2. So in the box, you have to write a negative 2. Make sure your terms are written in descending order and then write out their coefficients. So x cubed has a coefficient of 1, followed by a 6, a 4, and another 1. Bring down your first term. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Add 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Add 4 times negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8, and you get 9. Remember that last one is your remainder. So your final answer here for number 17 is going to be 1x squared, so just x squared, plus 4x minus 4 plus 9 over your x plus 2. Okay, when you're doing synthetic division to find a value, like we are here on number 18, go ahead and make sure your terms are in order, which these are. So go ahead and put 2, negative 2, negative 7, negative 11, and positive 15. When you want to find the value f of 4, you put 4 up in the box. Your answer here is going to be the remainder. So you're looking for the remainder. So on this one, bring down your 2. 2 times 4 is 8. Add them and you get 6. Multiply, you get 24. Add them, you get 17. Multiply by 4 and you get 68. Go ahead and add those. You get 57. Multiply by 4, you get 228. And then add them, 243. So your answer here would be 2x to the third plus 6x squared plus 17x plus 57 with a remainder of 243 over x minus 4. But remember, when you're using synthetic division to find a value, we only care about that remainder. So we care about the 243, which is that guy right there. And that's how you solve every problem on your Chapter 6 test review.